Okay, we are now live, and I do apologize for the delay. My system has been kind of wonky lately. I'm working off of old equipment, so I do apologize. So we're going to continue on with Sheriff in a Small Town, book two, and the next chapter we're going to be reading is Recovery. So let's get going. Frank's small office was packed out. Sitting behind the desk, he had quite a contingent present. Seated on the basket was Rocky, and the only comfortable chair sat Cat Charleston. Morgan leaned against the bookcase, and standing in front was a man who was the focus of the meeting, Josh. Frank turned to Cat to open the meeting since it was her suggestion that made it happen. She looked up at Josh. You put in real good articles about our town and help people understand the issues. I'd like to see you as the town's public relations manager. You could help keep us on track and even bring in tourists. I think it's a paying position too. She looked at Frank, who agreed. Well, the pay is about 20,000 a year, and since you're from a big city lately, I don't know how much that is to you, but for our town budget, it's a pretty good salary. Josh was trying hard not to scream. He'd only been making 15,000 a year at the office, and they wouldn't even consider giving him a raise for 5 years. Hell, I accept. Josh was shown to an office he could call his own. The key was handed over, and he was given a small budget to outfit the place to his liking. Josh sat behind the desk and pulled out a ring. It was a copy of the plastic ring, but of gold with a real ruby. He felt the time was finally arrived to propose to Jane. Jane. Rocky left and headed out to finish his round. At the corner, he turned around and went back to pick up Talbot. Things were quiet. It would be nice to have his company. Seated in the car was like turning back the clock. All the turmoil and craziness faded, and there was the future with all the odd things that happened. They took the long way around, weaving up one street and down the next, checking out the flower displays in people's gardens, waving to people sitting on the porch as they used to. It seemed that the community was coming back to normal. They finished off at the lake, as usual. It was the most peaceful place around for miles. They expected it to be unoccupied. Well, for the most part it was, except for one person who was hitting golf balls into the lake. They were intrigued because he was peering as if aiming for something on the rippling surface. Neither Rocky nor Talbot could see anything to aim at, but he appeared to be satisfied with his progress. Reaching into a commodious golf bag, he pulled out a large net. Talbot shrugged. Golf balls are expensive. Guess he's going to retrieve the ones he hit. The man did an initial scoop and pulled out a few fish. Putting these into a cooler, he sent the net in again and deep into the lake bed. He pulled out a fair number of white golf balls and put them into a basket. Placing the club and net back in the bag, he picked up the basket and the cooler and headed off home. Rocky leaned out as he passed. Do you always fish like that? The man grinned, opening up his cooler. He showed a good amount of fish. Hey, I have two passions, fishing and golf, and this allows me to combine them. It's good practice for accurate aiming. He went out whistling, heading for home and a good fish fry. Soon after, Rocky dropped Talbot off at home before doing a final check and heading home himself. Talbot walked in to see Agnes and Michaela reading a couple of letters. It said hello, but was ignored. He approached cautiously since whatever they were reading was apparently of paramount importance. A sudden scream of joy made him back up. Michaela looked up, saw him, and leapt into his arms, still screaming. Honey, take it easy. What the hell's going on? Agnes put over the letter since Michaela couldn't get anything intelligible out and was continuing her happy screaming. Agnes left with her own letter and went to give Rocky some news. Michaela's letter was from her doctor, and since the false pregnancy had happened, she had had 2 tests done a week apart. Now, there was no mistakes or false readings this time. This time, she really was pregnant. Talbot ran outside, screaming joyfully, running in circles and leaping high in the air. When they both had their senses back, they went to their neighbors and explained the noise. Talbot had boxes of cigars to hand out, real, bubble gum, and chocolate. The phone rang and Talbot breathlessly answered. It was Rocky calling to congratulate him and Michaela. You might also want to congratulate us. Agnes is pregnant also. I knew those two were spending way too much time together. Apparently, they're in sync in more ways than we thought. Well, congratulations again. Take the rest of the week off. Agnes wants to ride along with me, so I won't be wanting for company. Glad things turned out for you folks at last. Agnes came with Rocky for the last check of the night. She was snuggled close, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her, holding her close. Life was good, and he had everything a man could ask for. Soon he'd have another person to love and care for. As they turned off Main Street and onto a side road, they saw a cat running around with arms flailing, trying to retrieve her chickens again. Driving up slowly, they saw her neighbors all come out and herd them back to the coop. Some remained and talked to Cat. Nobody seemed angry or even upset. For her neighbors, it was a common occurrence, and they accepted it as part of their daily lives. They talked to Cat for a while before heading inside. Most of the comments were their surprise and admiration for her work in getting the Cultural Preservation Society started and getting Josh in as president. She was proud of what she had done, but now that it was over, she was back to being a recluse. Agnes got out to talk to her as well. The hug she received from Cat meant she also was spreading the good news when they parted. Oh, they're having a hard time today. This is just not my day. When they parted, Cat danced her way back into the backyard and fed her chickens. Rocky was letting himself back into the car after holding the door open for Agnes. Getting back into the snuggle position, she whispered in his ear, "I know why Cat's chickens get out so often." Rocky was so surprised he had to pull over. "All right, why?" "She lets them out on purpose. She's lonely, and whenever it comes out to help shoo them back in, they stay and talk sometimes. She's shy as well, so it's her way of making calls." As they passed the tavern, Rick was talking to Horace as he was locking up. Horace was listening intently. Rick pocketed the keys and patted Horace's neck. Horace tapped Rick's shoulder with his chin, then headed home to his stall. They slowly followed as Horace picked up the small. Yeah, I'm doing good. As Horace picked up the stall door rope, entered his stall, and pulled the door closed after himself. A final neigh, and he settled down to sleep. Rocky could feel Agnes shaking her head in wonder. She'd often heard about Horace, but hearing and seeing the reality were two different things. Her favorite object in the courthouse was a picture of Horace asleep in a cell under a blanket. Tomorrow was to be a community picnic in the field. Hundreds of people bringing food to share or bringing things for games. Music would be divided between the town band and the high school band. There would be a few standard events like the Children's Pet Parade, the grammar school children's sing-along, the chapel choir competing against the Catholic church choir. Then there was her favorite part, the talent contest that anyone could take part in. The secret talents of the community was always amazing to her. Of course, there were jugglers, amateur magicians, a ventriloquist or two. She'd heard that a group was going to perform Abbott and Costello routines, and another group would imitate the Marx Brothers. Talbot, Rocky, Josh, and Joe had created a barbershop quartet, while Agnes, Michaela, and two others were doing a medley of Andrew's sister numbers. Whether the acts were good or bad, everyone always showed appreciation help me, appreciated by loud cheers and thunderous applause. The finale this year was that all the people who sang would gather in the center while both bands played on either side. The song they had planned on practice or had been practicing was "We'll Meet Again." They had all been practicing separately, and it would be interesting to hear how they mingled when they got together. Agnes woke early in the morning of the fete, not of her own accord. The sound of cans falling off the shelf in the kitchen and a soft thud were enough to rouse her from a deep slumber. Laying next to her, Tucker softly snored, and with his head resting on her hip. She reached over to Rocky, only to find he wasn't in bed. She flung the cover off and slipped into slippers and a robe. She loved her husband. Rocky was not, and never had been, a completely normal husband. He's only getting an idea at 2 in the morning and leap out of bed and go to his office and work it out. I need a drink. Oh, goodness, what a day. Yeah, that's better. By the way, to those who are joining, hello. Where was I? There we go. She had not expected him to be in the kitchen at, she checked the clock, 1 o'clock, cooking himself something. She crept down the stairs cautiously. He was sleepwalking, as he sometimes did. She understood it was unwise to shock them awake. In the kitchen, Rocky was carefully getting to his feet. He seemed to be having a hard time maintaining his balance. Oh my lord, she whispered. He's been up all night drinking. This was so incredibly out of character that she doubted that could be the reason for his imbalance. Squinting, she made out that Rocky had 2 small cans of tomato paste strapped to his feet. Feeling that there could be no reasonable explanation for his action, she went back to bed. Sliding between the sheets, Tucker raised his shaggy head with a questioning look. She shrugged, and they went back to sleep. She partially woke when she heard the screen door slap shut. Peering out the window, she saw Rocky in shafts of moonlight running to the work shed. From the manner of his running, she could see something he had figured out had made him mad with glee. Early in the morning, Rocky was still not inside. She decided to get breakfast ready. Thankfully, Rocky had cleaned up his mess. Tucker walked sluggishly to the pantry and retrieved his bag of food for Agnes to pour into his bowl. She got out fixings for a breakfast bake with biscuit dough on top. Having no idea what Rocky was doing or how long it would take, she figured out a breakfast that would keep in the oven. The clunk of a long ladder being placed beside the window startled her. Rocky was climbing up, holding a piece of rope. She brought over the kitchen stool to the window. Her curiosity was roused, and she wanted to see this one out. Feet dangling over the partial roof meant Rocky was sitting above the window. The rope pulled taut, and the 2 long poles rose to where he sat. She could see items attached to the poles, including a belt, foot pads, and straps. She watched as Rocky's head appeared upside down as he strapped himself into the foot pads. He stood, and the belt was tightened around his waist. Agnes had never seen a pair of stilts before, but had heard of them and could recognize them. Fearing that Rocky would take one step and topple over like a falling tree, she dashed outside to attempt to catch him should he pitch. Not a good idea in her present condition. Tucker fouled, and at the sight of Rocky standing on long poles, he danced about and then christened the stilts. Rocky took it. Need more drink. Hold on. Oh, Lord, it's dry in here. Rocky took a deep breath and ventured forth. His balance was excellent, far better than it had been on the tomato paste cans. He walked swiftly around the yard with long strides while Tucker chased after him, barking joyously. Agnes finally let out her breath when she realized that far from falling, he appeared to be completely at home on them. Okay, she shouted up to him. We're very impressed. Now come down and get your breakfast. Over breakfast, Rocky explained that Talbot was bringing a tablecloth that he would tuck into the belt, and it would look like he was wearing red and white striped pants. Agnes was curious about one thing. How the heck are you going to get him to the field? Rocky hadn't considered this, and hoped that by tying them down to the bed of the truck, angled above the cab, they'd arrive in good shape. Breakfast over, they prepared the salads and meat to bring to the party. By 11 o'clock, everything was ready, and they drove out. Tucker usually rode in either back or inside as he felt like it. Trouble this time, in the bed were 2 long poles and all the food in foil pans, so he chose to sit inside in the back seat. With his neckerchief on and his paw on the armrest, he was the very picture of massive dignity. Rocky was sure people had been up all night setting the field up. People were milling around, talking in small groups or throwing frisbees. A few were fishing in the river. A large group were placing long boards on top of sawhorses for placing food on. Paper plates and cups were being held down with rocks. Plastic trash bags were tied off everywhere. Tucker looked happy to watch as he sat wagging his tail. People passing by stopped and paid their respects, first to Tucker and then to Agnes and Rocky. Word had gotten around quickly and that she was pregnant, and congratulations fell from every lip. In his dining room at home, Talbot was cutting into a long striped tablecloth. When Michaela came in and saw him, she gasped and then smacked him on the back. Talbot, Evan, Lawrence, what the hell are you doing to my best tablecloth? She ran out and retrieved her sewing kit. Placing it in front of him, she angrily pointed at the long cut. You sew that up right now, mister, and you better do a damn good job. She stood with her hands on her hips, biting her lips. Talbot sat for a few moments looking at her. Then sheepishly he pulled out a needle and thread and began the infuriating task of threading the needle. She watched, and when she saw he was going to do what she wanted, she went into the kitchen to make breakfast and get things ready for the picnic. All the time she was in the kitchen, she was breathing heavily and cursing softly. Talbot stopped trying to thread the needle and listened to his wife slamming skillets and pans on the stove, doing a pretty good imitation of the Anvil chorus. Her mutterings and cursings were becoming louder. He went to a cupboard and pulled out an identical tablecloth. He had purchased the one he had been cutting on purpose because it so resembled his wife's favorite. Bringing it into the kitchen, neatly folded, she snatched it and flapped it open. There is no way you could have done a decent job on fixing this up in that short time. She turned it over and over, side to side, but couldn't find the tear. She looked up bewildered to see Talbot's face breaking up. That's yours. I bought another to make Rocky's pans for stilts. Stilts for pans, to make pans for Rocky's stilts. He sat down and laughed. She sat in his lap, facing him, and with puny blows beat on his chest. You're a devil, you know that? You'll pull one too many pranks on me, and that will be the end of you. She hopped off his lap after giving him a kiss and then went back to finishing breakfast. Much quieter as she commenced. Talbot folded the cloth and put it away, then returned to set the table. Later, they took the squad car to the field. Talbot was in uniform, who would periodically check on things in town. Rocky would take over towards evening. Rocky was sitting on a high branch of a tree and was strapping on the stilts. Talbot tossed up the cloth and Rocky tucked it in. Talbot tied off the bottom ends around the stilt leg. Rocky walked around and then got into position to lead the pet parade. Agnes sent Tucker over to Rocky, and the children lined up with their pets behind them. The band struck up If You're Happy and You Know It, followed by the ants go marching, and alternated as long as the parade lasted. Rocky forced himself to march in small steps from on high, in keeping with the short legs of the children. They made one circuit of the field, then they separated. Rocky sat in the tree, unhooked everything, and slid down the stilts while Tucker barked and danced around, eager for him to join them. There was a short concert by the bands of some memorable tunes, including Final Countdown, which had people stomping and yelling. Amateur time came after the concert, where plenty of people lined up to show off their talents. Rocky looked amongst the participants and saw Talbot. His talent surprised Rocky. He pulled a basketball and began bouncing it. Now, Rocky had heard of the Harlem Globetrotters and assumed that Rocky had mastered some of the tricks. Talbot bounced the ball a final time and stood on it. His balance was impressive as he changed to 1 foot, bent forward with one hand behind, and His balance was impressive as he changed to 1 foot and bent forward with 1 foot behind. He then did a hand walk and walked onto the ball. Balanced, he began to bounce standing inverted, then rolled himself forward while his legs moved as if he was walking in the air. When he was done, he sprang backwards, landing standing, kicked up the ball, and finished with a series of spins and rolls around his arms, neck, and fingers. The applause was ecstatic. He came back winded. Michaela pulled him with her to get some food. Agnes came back with 3 plates, which confused Rocky until she laid one down for Tucker. Agnes and Michaela ate quickly because it was almost time for their act. Rocky would do his barbershop singing afterwards. Agnes wiped her lips, stood, and motioned for the other ladies to follow, to center. They were accompanied by the high school band who played Bugle Boy of Company C. The bugler was a freshman from the looks of him, but he played a mean bugle. When the ladies finished, they brought him front and center to receive his applause. They all kissed him at the same time while cameras flashed pictures. The film may have been black and white for the most part, which was kind of a shame since his face was flaming red. Rocky gathered his group and they performed a rendition of Longest Time by Billy Joel. Rocky and Josh were singing tenor with Talbot as alto and Joe as bass. They leaned over, heads together as they snapped time, their voices blending in harmony that made some of the young ladies swoon. When they finished, all the singers and bands got together for We'll Meet Again. It was one of those songs that, when done with feeling, touched the hearts of young and old. Veterans of World War II were in tears as memories flooded back to their times away from home. Other veterans were similarly affected, but this was a World War II veterans song, and they had a special place in their hearts for it. After it was sung, people broke up. The band played the melody, and they had one slow dance to it. Agnes chose an aged veteran and danced with him. His legs were weak, and she was holding him upright, but he danced with his body in the 1980s and his mind in the 1940s. When the music ceased, she helped him back to his chair, clasped her hand with tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. Sitting down next to Rocky, she listened to the band play a few more numbers as people either danced or began to leave. Talbot came back, handed over the keys, and bid Rocky and Agnes goodnight. Tucker barked them on their way, and Rocky dropped Agnes off home, and he and Tucker began their night duty. All right, we're good. Let's see, we've been doing this now for 22 minutes, so we're going to do possibilities next. When Rocky arrived at the courthouse a couple of days later, he was surprised to see Talbot there ahead of him. A rare occurrence indeed. Coffee was already made in a clean pot, the floor swept clean, and the cells neat and tidy. Talbot was reading and rereading a letter that had come to the courthouse. Rocky grabbed the coffee and sat in the chair opposite him. Rocky saw the heading was from Asheville in the Pickaway County and was addressed to Talbot. Talbot looked up, seeing Rocky handed over the letter. The missive announced their desire to have Talbot become their sheriff. Apparently, one of the people here in town had relatives living in Pickaway and told them about the deputy who had done so much for the town was an equal in capability to Sheriff Stone. Rocky pulled out a map and looked over the area he'd be responsible for. A small town surrounded by farms. Hell, Talbot, you won't even realize you moved. Well, looks like a nice little place. The sheriff's office is right across from the park. Hopefully they have a nice little diner for you both. Says they put you up for a week to allow you to get the feeling of the place. What do you think? Want to check it out? Talbot hesitated. He owed Rocky and the town a lot, and it felt like leaving would almost be like insulting them. He called Michaela, and she had a short vacation. And she said a short vacation might be pleasant. Looking again at Rocky, he saw him nod in the affirmative. So I figured it wouldn't hurt to take a look. Driving down, they discussed the benefits of the change from deputy to sheriff. So, more pay, obviously, a change from being under someone to being in charge, plus a chance to make a name for myself. Michaela was searching the letter as he talked. So the town's so small you won't have a deputy. They say there isn't enough crime to warrant it. Does that mean you will be working longer hours than you do now? Talbot shook his head. Probably not. I'd have to do a night shift probably a couple of times a week, but I think we'll have plenty of time together. Michaela put the letter in the glove compartment. Looking out the window, she thought not about what she would be gaining, but what she'd be losing. She and Agnes had become sisters, and now that they were both pregnant, they had become even closer. They were keeping an eye on each other and always on the lookout for gifts or the other's baby. Felt like moving away from family. Talbot's thoughts were running along some similar lines. He and Rocky had become brothers not only due to their military background and as local law enforcement, it ran even deeper than that. There was mutual respect and trust. True, they liked to pull pranks on each other, but it was all in fun. Talbot would rig up some elaborate Rube Goldberg contraption that would go off and Rocky opened the door. His last had taken all night to set up and he even had a Super 8 film of it. He marveled at how Rocky would sometimes come in on his day off just to hang out with him. That kind of friendship was rare. Pulling into town, they asked for the first person they met where the Dewdrop Inn was. The person pointed down the street and said, "Go down 3 blocks and it's on the right." "You folks sure that's the place you wanted to stay?" "Yeah, I might be the new sheriff. They put us up there for a week so we can look the town over." The man shrugged and walked off. Michaela hunched in her seat, asking if they were sure if they wanted to stay there meant it probably wasn't the best hotel around. Turning right, she saw it wasn't even close. Not that it was run down or even filthy, it just had an air of complacency. It hadn't been updated in a long time. Checking in, they were greeted cheerfully enough. Packet was handed over with their key. I need another drink, sorry. Okay. The clerk was on the phone letting the civic council president know that Talbot had arrived. She held the phone close. "Sir, if you'd like to put your luggage away, the council president will be here soon to show you around." Placing the cases on the stand, they opened the envelope. Inside was a map of the area with points of interest circled, a listing of restaurants where it had been arranged that they would eat for free, and a couple of tickets to the Viking Festival. The room was small, but at least had a balcony. Michaela opened up the windows to get rid of the musty smells. Going back downstairs, they saw a long limousine parked outside. Michaela's eyes popped open wide. "Do you think that's for us?" "Probably. They must want to make a good first impression." Down in the lobby, they were met by James Turner. Dressed in jeans and a blue work shirt, he seemed pleasant and pleased to meet them. Shaking hands, he led them out to the limo. It was only when they passed the doorway that they saw the rest of it. Michaela looked into the rear of the hearse. She was willing to get inside only when she saw it was empty. James apologized for the hearse. "We had to borrow from McKay's funeral home. We wanted to rent a limo, but couldn't get one in time." Seated in the front, Talbot turned around to talk to Michaela. "Honey, it was a long drive down here, and you look bushed. Why not climb into the back and take a rest?" She saw the twinkle in his eye and understood. Sliding decorously over the seat, she adjusted her dress and lay back down. James looked at Talbot with a burning curiosity. The shaking tone of Talbot's voice told him something good was in the offing. Driving a couple of blocks, he was set to turn when the light turned red. Talbot put a hand on his arm, intimating he should wait. When the car drew up alongside, Talbot cleared his throat. Michaela sat straight up and slowly looked to the side. The man floored his car and roared off in a cloud of smoke. James immediately understood about everything he needed to know about the people he had picked up. Michaela lay back down, laughing, and waited for the next summons. Driving around, James explained a bit about the town. It's a quiet place, that's for sure. Plenty of parks for a growing family. Lots of farms, good schools, 4 churches, and plenty of places of refreshment. Ted was looking out both sides as they drove around. The town looked very quiet. He couldn't imagine how he'd fill all his spare time. They passed the courthouse. The sheriff's office was a small portion on the side. "Come on, you might want to meet the current sheriff since we're here." Stepping out of the car, they walked into the sheriff's office. The sheriff was in, but sound asleep in the back room. James went back and kicked the bed. Sheriff Mike Tolson got up, splashed his face, and adjusted his uniform. When he came to the front, he was moderately awake and presentable. The sheriff was around 50, heavy-set, and had the look of a man who didn't waste any energy. Talbot wondered how he'd ever chase down a crook. "Deputy and Mr. Talbot, please let me introduce our current sheriff, Mike Tolson." Tolson showed them around. The office was, tolerably clean, but not to the standards Rocky and he had set. There was only one cell, and the rest on the hinges showed it wasn't used much. Talbot walked around quietly, looking over the equipment. The gun case was dusty, and the guns looked as if they hadn't been maintained in a long time. The board held the usual posters that came in off the facts, and but many were yellowed and curled with age. The filing cabinet was for filing in name only. Papers were laid inside and not sorted by any means Talbot could fathom. Sheriff Tolson apologized for being asleep with a sheepish grin. Pointed to the desk chair. I had sat there for many a lonely hour. Did 3 runs around town. It was just so darn quiet. I didn't think it hurt none to catch a few winks. Talbot nodded as if understanding, though he really couldn't understand the sheriff taking a nap on duty. James shrugged it off as of no consequence. If the sheriff's conduct bothered him, he wasn't showing it. Things are pretty quiet around here. How many people have you had to put in the cells in all the time you've been sheriff? Tolson sat on the edge of his desk. Can't have been more than 5 in all that time. Folks around here respect the law. James patted him on the back. And they're sheriff. Talbot considered the differences between home and here. Back home, people were in and out of the office all day. Sometimes to gossip, sometimes to warn of someone new in town. But the place was busy. He wasn't sure about how to fill his time if the place was often this quiet. Michaela looked the place over also. She tut-tutted about the air of neglect around it. Back into the hearse, they visited the parks, lakes, and rivers. Michaela had an opportunity to fright the daylights out of a few more locals. She asked if they could get something to eat, and driving to the Cherry Street Diner, they passed several bars. They seemed decent enough, and the people inside were quietly drinking and not talking much. People they passed said good morning, but seemed, well, subdued. There wasn't the air of excited friendliness as there was at home. The diner was so quiet it was unnerving. Food was filling and well prepared, but here also something seemed lacking. Town seemed almost too quiet, as if people were frightened or concerned about something. Talbot found this not only discouraging, but hard to understand. The people he passed on the street were for the most part young. They decided to head over to the largest park. This was better since there was plenty of activity and a noise. They sat on the ground and watched, and as people passed, they said hi, but people said hi in passing. Nobody welcomed them or asked if they were staying. Talbot looked over at Michaela. If they moved here, she was going to feel very lonely. James left them to finish the tour on their own. They went to the chapel and churches. They found them closed and locked. As they walked around, they discovered that they seemed to be the only African Americans around, or if there were more, they were few and far between. It's going to be lonely in lots of ways, it seemed. They were already getting the feeling of alienation. Not that people shunned them, but just a feeling of not belonging. The sheriff's car pulled up alongside them. Sheriff Tolson leaned out the window. Hey, folks, I was wondering if you want to take the shift tomorrow. A good chance for you to see what a day here is like. Hell, a sharp guy like you probably packed his uniform and badge. Talbot admitted that he had and agreed to take the shift. All right, here's the key to the place. I'll leave the squad car keys in the desk. Have fun tomorrow. I wasn't sure how to take this kind of attitude. Who'd let a complete stranger take a shift and not be there to check on what they did and how they were doing? Kayla wasn't sure she liked the idea either. They went up to their room and sat for a while before heading home. The 2-hour drive was completed in silence. That was sure something was wrong, but didn't know what. Arriving in the office, he put in a call to Arthur Freeman. He explained everything as best he could. It didn't sound convincing even to himself. Arthur requested they remain at the courthouse. He traveled down with them. When Arthur arrived, Talbot was on his own. Michaela had been sent home since too much seemed strange about this whole thing. First, the sheriff basically handing off his office to a stranger, then Arthur agrees to come down here in a moment's notice. Arthur slid into Talbot's car and buckled in with the look of a man who knew he was headed into trouble but was determined to see it through. The state comptroller, Thomas Victor, is going to meet us there. In fact, he'll probably be there waiting on us. Talbot was concerned at all the firepower. Arthur, I was just calling for advice. I didn't mean to start all this. I don't have a thing to go on but a gut feeling. Arthur agreed. Well, your gut was right. I did an inspection last month. I noticed quite a few discrepancies and let them assume I let them slide, but it took enough to put them on edge. I was curious to see what they do. They called you in to be the fall guy. Have you touched anything in the office? Hell, not a thing. I had my hands in my pocket the whole time. Only thing I touched were the keys that he tossed to me. I don't think Michaela touched anything either. It wasn't very clean, and she's kind of particular. Arthur nodded, glad to hear it. The only fingerprints there are the sheriff's or James were golden. In Sheriff Tolson's living room, he and James were discussing the sheriff prospect. James, I think he is exactly what we're looking for. He's got an honest face and a trusting nature. He's the kind that won't fall asleep on the job. Both men laughed. James slapped down a map of the county. Now, if he's come here serious about taking over, then I figure he'll do a thorough job of checking out his territory. How long do you figure he'll be away from the office? Well, a few times I did a complete tour. It took me a couple of hours. Figure on him doing a pretty good look over the territory and working out what he'd have to do in case of a call to some of the outlying areas. I guess we'll have a good 3 hours before he's back. He takes his wife along, figure an extra hour. James rubbed his hands. Good, that gives us a chance to welcome him properly. We'll even do a good job on his car. Nice one, that's stylish for a small town sheriff. Well, that fits in right with his welcome package. Goes really well with a fancy car like that. Have it parked across the street on the far side of the park. They walked a long way around to ensure they weren't seen. At the back of the courthouse, Arthur handed over the keys to the comptroller. Comptroller handed 3 warrants over to Talbot, but spoke to Arthur. I have these on the probable cause when you phoned. Judge Hamilton had already read your files and was ready to issue them anytime we needed them. The men put on overboots and gloves. Once the door was open, Talbot wasn't sure if they should turn on the lights or not. Arthur used a shaded flashlight and handed another to Comptroller Victor. Together, they went around photographing evidence. Stacks of bills, false tickets, fines for various technicalities were all methods used to enrich a sheriff and probably others. Others assumed that James received a cut, but proof of that would come later. They went back outside and prepared for the day. Comptroller Victor spoke to both men. I want Deputy Talbot here to go about as if he was doing his duty conscientiously for the day. Talbot moved his car to the front as if he'd arrived for his shift. Getting out, he wasn't sure how to act. Well, should I clean up? Well, if that's what you would ordinarily do on a shift, do it. Keep the plastic gloves on, though, under your driving ones. Do your drive or walk around town and anything else that is natural. Let people see you. Take your time as if you were getting acquainted with the territory. Figure on a couple of hours at least, say 2.5 at most. Around 1400, I want you to contact James and ask him to come over. Tell him you have suspicions that something's going on. We'll be watching from the hotel room until it's time to come over. If we see anything that concerns your safety, we'll be over earlier. Talbot handed over the room keys, and the 2 men left, explaining they had head to the office before 1400. Going back inside, Talbot prepared for his shift. He cleaned the office, oiled the cells, straightened up the board, removing old data, but placing it into an envelope in case they wanted it, papers for some reason. When the office was tidy, he got into the squad car and headed out for a round. The squad car smelled of beer and smoke. Pulling over at the park, he emptied the ashtray and bagged and tossed cans of Schlitz. When he drove off towards the farm, the 2 men near the courthouse went into action. From the room Talbot had been allotted, 2 men watched through powerful binoculars. Entering the courthouse, they inspected the facility to see what Talbot had done. It was evident that he had cleaned and oiled doors and cells. He'd adjusted the notice board, swept and dusted. Sheriff Tolson looked around approvingly. Well, good man, he's got the place neat and tidy. Well, let's get the stuff for his welcome. From the desk, they slid back a false bottom and pulled a few items in small packages of money. The 50s on top with a stack of singles beneath. It looked like the packs contained far more than they actually did. From a cabinet in the back, James pulled out the stack of papers that covered a small bag. Opening it, he pulled out a syringe and drug paraphernalia. Sheriff Tolson worked to Jimmy with the smooth actions of a man with years of experience. He had the items and money in the trunk and closed the lid. Inside the car, they put the small bag of drugs and vial and tucked a revolver into the rear seat. As the sheriff worked, James kept a constant lookout for the squad car returning. The two had practiced this method of planting evidence in order to incarcerate and then extort money from people traveling through for a long time. It was just bad luck that Arthur had arrived the previous month to do a surprise inspection. Now they planted the evidence that might have incriminated them onto Talbot to make him the scapegoat. James was sitting on the stoop in front of the courthouse. Well, we're going to explain the evidence of corruption in a man who arrived yesterday. Tolson took off his gloves and tucked them into his pants pocket. Well, that's easy. I just say he came in for an interview last month, and they allowed him to do a tour of duty then. He did such a good job, I decided to allow him another crack at it. You, in your capacity as council president, heard rumors about the sheriff doing some illegal stops and taking bribes. You knew it couldn't have been me since I have such a sterling reputation. That's what prompted you to invite Deputy Talbot back for a week to determine if he really was the person. After you talked with him for a while, you came out here and had me do a search of his car. We find the stuff, and any protestation of innocence can be waved aside. The evidence will convict him. We call him that auditor fellow and show the evidence. We're in the clear, and Sheriff Stone has to find himself a new deputy. Having completed their mission, they headed over to the park to wait for their temporary sheriff's return. In the hotel room, two men were taking pictures with a telephoto lens detailing the sheriff and councilman's deceit. I wonder how often they've done this. Seems to me it must have been plenty if they can conceal it all so quick. Well, I have enough pictures. When do you want to head over and start the show? Just wait until Talbot returns. I have a feeling the moment he walks back into the office, they'll return from the park and lay into him. In the distance, they saw the squad car heading back at a sedate pace. Talbot looked completely at home and seemed as if he had enjoyed his round of the district. Pulling the squad car in from front of the sheriff's office, the two pairs of men converged on the courthouse. Talbot's enemies arrived from the front, his stalwart protectors from the rear. Talbot walked inside, checked the fax machine, and was putting notices up on the information board. He heard the ching of the bell over the door announcing visitors. Turning, he greeted sheriff and councilman with a wide grin. Morning, gentlemen. Glad to see you. I just got back from doing a tour around. Gotta say, it's a real nice area. Sheriff Tolson sat on the edge of the desk. Glad you like it. You didn't get a chance to see much on your last trip. Arthur and Victor entered the back door quietly and heard the sheriff. Has Talbot been here before? Arthur whispered back. I doubt it. Talbot sounded confused, but I haven't been here before. Sheriff Tolson chuckled. Sure you have. You went on a patrol just like you did today. James nodded. Seems I received a few calls from some of our citizens that you wrote tickets for some minor infractions. The sheriff checked the files and didn't find any records or money. That's why I sent the letter to bring you back. I want to see what kind of man we had called on to take over for Tolson. Talbot took a few moments to get control of his temper. When he did, it made his anger even more apparent. Well, I've never been here before, and I'm beginning to think coming down here was a mistake. James looked towards the sheriff. I'm sure you do. We're going to have to check your vehicle. I just hope the sheriff doesn't find anything. It'd do a hell of a lot of damage to your sterling reputation if he found any compromising evidence. Talbot produced the keys to his Pontiac Fiero and handed them over. James led the way. Talbot followed, with the sheriff in the rear with his gun drawn. Arthur and Victor quietly brought up the rear. At the car, James handed the keys to the sheriff to wave them away. Do you remember how to do a search like I taught you? James looked uncomfortable. I think so, but it's been a while since you trained me. Sheriff Tolson smiled encouragingly. Just give it your best try. I've got to keep Talbot covered. I let you do it, but I know you weren't comfortable handling guns. This was a blatant fabrication. Councilman James was one of the best shots in the county, even better than the sheriff. He looked over the keys and tried a few before finding the one that unlocked the trunk. The trunk was empty, but he ran his hands over the carpet and down into the sidewalls. He shrugged and looked over to the sheriff. Well, seems clean to me. Sheriff Tolson's voice was patient, as if this was simply an exercise. Lift up the rug and check where the spare tire is. James snapped his fingers. I plumb forgot about that. Lifting the board and under the carpet, he felt around and lifted the spare tire. Underneath was a packet of papers and some money. He handed both over to the sheriff, who shook his head. Well, seems like this is where the phony paperwork and money went. Must have forgotten it since your last time. Turned to James, who was waiting for instructions. Better check the inside. Make sure you check between the seats and sides as well as under. Check if the carpet is loose anywhere, and don't forget to pull the map box too. The door from the sheriff's office opened, and Arthur leaned on the frame while Comptroller Victor held the door open. Victor spoke, his voice barely controlling his laughter. Let's see if I remember where he put everything. Gun in the back seat, drugs tucked into the pocket on the right-hand side of the seat, drugs behind the glove compartment, taped on a small box. He tapped Arthur on the shoulder. Did I forget anything? Yeah, the needle and vial tucked between the driver's seat and center console. James dove for cover when Sheriff Tolson spun around, cocking his gun as he swiveled. Talbot grabbed James at the same time as he chopped Tolson's arm, forcing him to drop the gun. Unarmed but still game, Sheriff Tolson dove for his gun, only to receive a swift kick from Talbot's leg, sending him flying onto his back. Talbot sent James into the grip of Arthur and Victor while he tackled Tolson, who was rolling to his feet. Kicking the gun away as he launched himself, he dodged Tolson's kick, only to be struck with his other leg. Such a heavy and usually sluggish individual, he showed remarkable strength and speed when cornered. Both men bounced to standing and leapt for the gun. Arthur emerged from putting James into the cell. He rushed over and slapped handcuffs onto the sheriff. Jerking him upright, Talbot handed over the gun by the barrel. Victor was on the phone for the state sheriff to come pick up both men. Mayor George Robeson stormed in demanding that his sheriff be released. He turned to Deputy Talbot and berated him for overstepping his authority. You are here as an observer to see how we do things. You are not brought here to act as a sheriff. I'll call a state and have you demoted to street cleaner. Talbot pulled out the warrants. Sir, please give me the authority, and I suggest you explain where your name is listed on the people to be paid by these two. The mayor turned ferociously on Sheriff Tolson and Councilman James. You idiots kept records? He turned to Talbot with open arms. Look, Deputy, this is obviously a misunderstanding. The funds, if there are any under my name, were to go to the county as the regulations require. I don't know what these two have been up to, but if anything was illegal, then of course you are within your rights to arrest them. I just can't believe Sheriff Tolson or this other man could do anything that dishonest. They've always been pillars of the community. Comptroller Victor laughed. I'm sure you are as well. Since I'm here, it might be a good opportunity to examine the books for this county. The mayor tried to determine who the speaker was, but Blanche from Victor handed over his card. Arthur made a phone call and asked for a sheriff to be detailed to Archway County. We'll make sure things stay safe here until the people can elect some folks who won't be dishonest. Deputy Talbot will need to call you in for a trial, but you're free to go. Talbot shook hands and went to his car. He stripped it, finding several items that had been planted, and bagged them. Handing them over, he put his car together again and left for home. Parking in front of the courthouse, he checked in with Rocky. Rocky clasped his hand warmly. So, how was the vacation? Talbot grinned. Okay, but I'm ready to get back to work. Rocky eyed him curiously. So, you didn't take the position? Nah, Michaela and I found a home here, and here we're staying. Want me to take the night shift tonight? Rocky stretched. Nah, it's pretty quiet. Probably as quiet as where you were. We can both take the night off. Talbot wandered around town before heading for home. People greeted him and welcomed him back. As he acknowledged the warm pleasantries, he mulled over the difference between the two places. Yeah, real quiet. He slowly drove home, trying to figure if he should tell Michaela that he had taken the position and then let her stew or tell her the truth right away. He determined that he'd rather stay alive, and if he joked with her on this, she'd be sure to do some damage to him. All right, that's it. We're almost at the end. Sheriff in a Small Cow Town is next. I'm really looking forward to this one, to reading this. This is a lot of fun. Sheriff Morgan is, oh man, I don't know if I should tell you. But if I don't tell you, you may not come back. So I'm going to tell you. Sheriff Morgan's asleep and he's dreaming, but he's dreaming that he is a Wild West sheriff. And Rocky is a teenager as his deputy. Rocky's about 16. So it's a really, really fun chapter. I enjoyed writing it. I'd really like to do an entire series or just of it being Western instead. So that's it for today. Let me get something here. I'm going to show you something real quick. Okay, this is Ledger Creation by a friend of mine, Steve Wolf. He wrote this a while back. I don't know if you can see this on the back. That's him riding a bike. And it's basically, it's the Tour de Ledge, just like the bicycle races, but it's a bicycle race on the Ledge of Creation, which is where Mother Earth has her home. And he has graciously given me permission to read these live. Now I've got about 3 chapters or 3 sections that I'm going to read. The first one is the prologue and a little bit of the first 2 chapters. And then we're going to do Chef Hat, which is a really fun chapter. And then my favorite is the pirates. There's about 4 or 5 chapters just about the pirates that are there. I'm trying to remember what they're called. They have a new name. It's Reformed something. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. It's not going to be the whole book, but it's enough. It's going to be enough that once you hear it, you're going to want to get your copy. I can't read this often enough. It's one of my favorite books. So that's it. We are done. And I look forward to seeing you again on our next reading, which will be on Friday at 10 o'clock. So I hope you'll be here. I look forward to seeing you. Be good and be good to yourself. So now I'm going to go over to my desk and shut this thing all down. So again, thanks for being here. I really do appreciate all the people who not only are here to listen when I'm reading, but also here to listen when we are when I'm offline and you are watching this from my site. So thank you very much. I really, oh God, I can't talk. Thank you again. I really do appreciate it. This one went an hour, so we're late. All right, you have a good one. Bye.